Most people think losing 1 pound a day is impossible. But the truth is that your body is far more adaptable than you've ever been told. Fat loss isn't just about calories. It's about understanding the hormones that decide whether your body burns fat or stores it. When those hormones work against you, even the hardest workouts and strict diets feel useless. But when you align your daily habits with how your metabolism actually functions, change happens faster than you expect. 1 pound a day isn't magic. It's biology. It's the result of removing the constant signals that push your body into fat storage mode and giving it the conditions it needs to finally tap into the fat you've been carrying for years. Simple steps can create extraordinary momentum, but simple has never meant easy. If you focus on the right levers, insulin control, meal timing, real nourishment, and metabolic rest, your body will respond in ways that feel almost unfair compared to the effort you put in. Most people never experience this because they've been taught the wrong battle entirely, chasing willpower instead of strategy. But once you understand what triggers fat loss at the hormonal level, you stop fighting your body and start working with it. Fat loss is driven by hormones, not willpower. And this simple truth completely reshapes how people approach their health journey. Most individuals blame themselves when they struggle, assuming they are weak, undisciplined, or lacking motivation. Yet, the real battle is happening inside the body. Hormones dictate hunger, cravings, energy use, and whether the body stores fat or burns it. When these hormonal signals are out of balance, the body resists fat loss, no matter how determined a person may be, creating the illusion of personal failure when the real issue is biological resistance. Understanding this gives people their power back because it shifts the focus from fighting cravings to adjusting the environment that creates those cravings in the first place. Modern diets, constant snacking, processed foods, and stress-heavy routines push hormones like insulin, cortisol, and ghrelin to behave in ways that favor fat storage. When insulin is high, the body cannot access stored fat effectively, no matter how little someone eats. This is why many people feel hungry, tired, and frustrated even while dieting, because willpower cannot override hormonal blocks that nature designed for survival. The body believes it must conserve energy and store more fat, not release it. When people believe fat loss is about force and restriction, they enter a cycle of temporary success followed by rebound weight gain. This happens because they never change the hormonal environment in their body. They merely pushed against it. Once the diet ends, the hormones that were driving hunger and cravings quickly reassert themselves, pulling the person back to old habits. Hormones like leptin and ghrelin regulate appetite in a far deeper way than motivation ever could, influencing not just hunger, but the intensity of hunger. When these hormones are imbalanced, no amount of determination can silence the urge to eat. That's why someone may feel strong in the morning and completely overwhelmed by cravings in the evening. The issue is not self-control. It is biology responding to signals that have been ignored for years. When the hormonal system finally shifts into balance, something remarkable happens. Fat loss becomes natural instead of forced. Hunger settles down, cravings weaken, energy rises, and the body becomes willing to use stored fat for fuel. The same person who once felt trapped in a cycle of overeating can suddenly go hours without thinking about food. This shift is not psychological. It is hormonal alignment. When insulin decreases through proper meal timing, reduced sugar intake, or periods of fasting, the body gains the ability to access its fat stores. This is why some people experience dramatic fat loss once they make these changes. Their willpower didn't increase. Their hormones finally stepped out of the way. Fat burning becomes easier, not because the person becomes stronger, but because the biological resistance that once blocked progress begins to fade. Many people are shocked when they realize that hormones control metabolic rate as well. Metabolism is not a fixed number. It adjusts according to hormonal signals. Chronic dieting and low-calorie eating slow metabolism because the body receives stress signals and tries to conserve energy. Hormones respond by reducing calorie burn and increasing hunger. This is why traditional diets eventually fail and leave people heavier than when they started. However, when the hormonal environment is improved through balanced eating patterns, quality sleep, lower stress, and thoughtful fasting, metabolism naturally increases. The body becomes more efficient at burning fat instead of clinging to it. The truth is that the body is always trying to protect itself, and hormones are the messengers it uses to make decisions about energy use and storage. Even emotional eating is influenced by hormones. Cortisol, the stress hormone, drives cravings for high-energy foods. It's not a lack of discipline that pushes someone towards sugary snacks when they are overwhelmed. It is cortisol signaling the body to seek quick fuel for survival. Understanding this allows people to replace shame with strategy. Instead of blaming themselves, they can work on managing stress, improving sleep, and creating routines that naturally lower cortisol. As cortisol decreases, cravings decrease as well. The shift is organic, not forced. This is the power of working with hormones instead of against them. Recognizing that fat loss is hormone-driven empowers people to make changes that are sustainable. Instead of focusing on constant restriction, they can focus on correcting the signals that tell the body what to do. When hormones support fat burning, willpower becomes a backup tool instead of the primary one. People begin to experience progress with less struggle, not because the journey becomes effortless, but because the internal resistance that once felt insurmountable begins to dissolve. This is a real foundation of consistent fat loss, and it is available to anyone who chooses to align their habits with how their body is designed to function. 1 pound a day becomes possible when insulin is consistently lowered because insulin is the primary hormone that determines whether your body stores fat or releases it. Most people assume fat loss is about exercising more or eating less, but without lowering insulin, the body simply doesn't open its fat stores for fuel. High insulin locks fat away and keeps it stored no matter how hard someone works or how disciplined they try to be. When insulin level elevated throughout the day from frequent eating, sugary foods, refined carbohydrates, and constant snacking, the body stays locked in fat storage mode. This explains why some people eat very little, yet still struggle to lose weight, while others make small changes and see dramatic results. The difference is not effort, it's insulin. Once insulin finally drops to a level where the body can access stored fat, the rate of fat loss accelerates naturally because the body has a massive reservoir of energy to tap into. Understanding how insulin works changes the entire approach to fat loss. Insulin is released every time you eat, especially when a meal contains sugar, refined grains, or foods that spike blood glucose quickly. Even healthy foods eaten too frequently can keep insulin elevated throughout the day. The modern habit of grazing, snacking, and constantly sipping calorie-containing drinks keeps the hormone high from morning until night. In that state, the body is constantly told to store energy, not burn it. But when someone extends the time between meals, focuses on whole foods, and avoids insulin-spiking ingredients, insulin begins to fall. As it falls, the body shifts from burning incoming calories to burning stored fat. This shift is the moment where fat loss becomes predictable and steady because the body is finally using its own fuel reserves instead of fighting to hold on to them. Lowering insulin doesn't require extreme dieting or starvation. It requires intentional structure. The timing of meals plays a major role in whether insulin stays elevated or gradually drops. When you give your body a period without food, whether through simple spacing of meals or structured fasting windows, insulin naturally declines. It is not a forceful process. It is the body returning to its natural rhythm. Humans were never designed to eat constantly. Historically, long gaps between meals were normal, and the body adapted by becoming efficient at using stored fat for energy. Only in recent decades has constant eating become the default, and with it came chronically high insulin levels and widespread weight struggles. When people reintroduce meal spacing or fasting, they are simply allowing the body to function the way it was built to function. Once insulin drops and remains stable, the energy landscape of the body changes. Hunger decreases because the body begins accessing its stored fuel. Cravings diminish because insulin spikes are often the root cause of sudden intense food urges. Energy levels become more stable, which helps people stay consistent without feeling deprived. All of these effects make it possible for fat loss to happen at a rate that surprises many people, sometimes approaching a pound a day during phases where the hormonal environment is fully aligned. This isn't because the person is starving themselves, but because the body is burning the energy it has stored for years, often in large amounts. The fat is simply fuel waiting to be used, but it cannot be accessed as long as insulin blocks the door. Food choices play a powerful role here as well. When people reduce sugars, refined grains, sweetened drinks, and processed foods, they eliminate the biggest drivers of insulin spikes. Replacing these with whole foods, healthy fats, lean proteins, and slow-digesting carbohydrates keeps insulin steadier throughout the day. Steady insulin means the body avoids switching in and out of fat storage mode, creating an environment where fat burning becomes continuous rather than intermittent. Even small changes, when applied consistently, can transform insulin patterns and unlock rapid fat loss. Stress and sleep influence insulin too. High stress increases cortisol, which can raise blood sugar and indirectly elevate insulin. Poor sleep disrupts metabolic regulation and makes insulin less effective, which pushes the body towards storing fat. When someone improves sleep and reduces stress, insulin sensitivity improves, and the body becomes even more responsive to the changes they make. This compounds the effect of meal timing and food choices, allowing fat loss to accelerate without additional effort. When insulin is finally controlled, the body shifts from a state of stubborn resistance to one of cooperation. Instead of fighting biology at every turn, a person begins to work with it. Losing 1 pound a day is not a miracle. It is a natural outcome of allowing the body to burn stored fuel consistently without interruption, and without the hormonal blocks that have held it back for years. Timing influences fat burning more than meal size, because the body responds differently depending on when you eat, how often you eat, and how much space you allow between meals. People often focus entirely on what they put on their plate, counting calories and adjusting portion sizes, yet overlook the rhythm that guides metabolism. The body is not designed to be in a fed state all day long. Every time you eat, your digestive system activates. Insulin rises and the body shifts into storing energy rather than using stored fat. When meals are spaced too closely together, even small ones, the body never gets a chance to enter the fat-burning phase. It stays stuck in storage mode, and fat loss becomes painfully slow or completely stalled. This is why someone can eat tiny meals throughout the day and still gain weight, while another person can eat larger meals less frequently and lose fat effortlessly. Timing dictates the hormonal pattern, and hormones dictate the outcome. When you extend the time between meals, insulin decreases, and the body begins to access stored fat for energy. This transition, called the fasting state, doesn't require extreme deprivation or suffering. It simply requires giving your system time to finish processing the previous meal before adding a new one. For many people, their biggest obstacle is constant eating, whether intentional or out of habit. Even a small snack keeps insulin higher than it should be, preventing the hormonal shift that allows fat burning to activate. The modern food environment encourages grazing with snacks available at every moment, but each of those moments interrupts the metabolic process that would otherwise help someone lose fat at a steady rate. Fat loss accelerates when the body experiences clean, uninterrupted gaps between meals. The first major shift happens when people reduce snacking. Even if they keep the same total calories and food types, removing snacks allows insulin levels to settle. When insulin settles, hunger signals become calmer and more predictable. Instead of experiencing abrupt energy crashes that push people towards sugary snacks, they begin to feel steady and balanced. This stabilizes the entire metabolic rhythm. Breakfast, lunch, and dinner become purposeful anchors rather than chaotic eating events scattered throughout the day. Over time, most people naturally reduce meal frequency because they no longer feel compelled by constant hunger, which is itself a sign that the body has begun tapping into stored fat for fuel. Meal timing also impacts circadian rhythms. The body is more insulin sensitive earlier in the day, which means it can handle food more efficiently. Eating large meals late at night disrupts metabolic balance and increases the likelihood of storing fat rather than burning it. Late-night eating also interferes with sleep quality, which further disrupts hormonal regulation. When meal timing aligns with the body's natural daily rhythm, fat burning becomes smoother and more reliable. Eating earlier, spacing meals properly, and avoiding nighttime eating can shift metabolic conditions dramatically, sometimes without changing the foods themselves. Structured eating patterns like time-restricted eating or intermittent fasting amplify these effects. By consolidating meals into specific windows, you automatically create longer periods of low insulin. These low insulin periods are where the body does its best fat-burning work. Even a simple 12-hour eating window provides benefits, while more advanced ones like 16-colonate or one meal a day create deeper metabolic shifts. During these fasting periods, the body becomes more efficient at mobilizing stored fat, producing steady energy, and reducing inflammation. People often report mental clarity, stable mood, and controlled appetite because the hormonal environment becomes more stable. These changes occur not because a person is eating less, but because they are eating at the right times. Meal size matters far less than people think, because the body is designed to handle fluctuations in meal volume. A large meal eaten after a proper fasting window can be processed effectively because insulin sensitivity is high and the body is primed to use incoming nutrients. A small meal eaten during a period of frequent snacking, however, becomes another trigger that keeps insulin elevated. This is why focusing exclusively on meal size often leads to frustration. People shrink portions but continue eating too frequently, unintentionally blocking fat burning. Once they adjust the timing, the same portion size has become far more effective for fat loss. Another overlooked aspect is the behavior of hunger hormones. Ghrelin, the hunger signal, rises and falls in predictable waves based on habitual meal times. When you change your eating schedule, ghrelin adapts within days. This is why people who begin spacing out meals often find that hunger fades rather than intensifies. Their hormones realign to a new rhythm, making the process feel natural rather than forced. This shows that cravings and hunger are not fixed obstacles. They are responses to timing patterns. By mastering meal timing, people shift their bodies from constantly storing energy to regularly burning stored fat. Fat loss becomes consistent because the hormonal environment supports it rather than blocks it. Meal timing becomes a silent driver of progress, influencing metabolism more deeply than portion control or calorie counting ever could. This is why strategic timing is one of the most powerful tools in fat loss, and why it often delivers results that feel disproportionate to the effort involved. Fasting periods allow the body to switch into stored fat usage because fasting is the only state in which insulin naturally falls low enough for fat burning to become the primary source of energy. Most people think fasting is about deprivation, but it is actually about giving the body space to do what it is designed to do. The body was built for cycles of feeding and fasting. And during fasting, an entirely different metabolic program activates. When you stop eating, insulin drops and growth hormone rises, signaling the body to tap into stored energy instead of waiting for new food to arrive. This shift happens gradually, but once insulin falls far enough, the body begins to release fatty acids from fat cells. These fatty acids travel to the liver, where they are converted into ketones, a clean and efficient fuel source that powers both the body and the brain. This is why many people feel increased clarity and energy during fasting. The body is no longer burdened by constant digestion and is instead running on its own energy reserves. Fat storage and fat burning are never happening at the same time. They are opposite states dictated by insulin. When insulin is elevated, the body stores fat. When insulin is low, the body burns fat. Fasting is the most reliable way to lower insulin because no food means no insulin response. Even healthy foods raise insulin. So fasting provides the cleanest metabolic environment for fat burning. This is why fasting is often more effective than cutting calories. Calorie restriction without fasting lowers metabolism and increases hunger. But fasting preserves metabolism because the body shifts to stored fuel instead of panicking from perceived scarcity. The hormonal balance during fasting protects lean muscle, maintains energy levels, and allows the body to burn fat without sacrificing metabolic health. One of the most powerful effects of fasting is restoring insulin sensitivity. When someone eats frequently, especially sugary or processed foods, insulin stays high, and the body becomes resistant to it. This forces the pancreas to produce even more insulin, creating a cycle of storing fat and increasing hunger. Fasting breaks this cycle by giving the body long periods without insulin spikes. The cells regain their sensitivity. This means that when the person eventually eats, their body can handle the incoming nutrients more efficiently, storing less fat and using more energy properly. Improved insulin sensitivity is one of the main reasons people see rapid fat loss when they incorporate fasting into their routine. Fasting also activates autophagy, a cellular repair process that clears out damaged or dysfunctional cells. While autophagy is not directly about fat loss, it improves the overall function of the body, reducing inflammation and supporting metabolic health. Inflammation is one of the major blockers of fat loss as it disrupts hormones and interferes with insulin signaling. When inflammation decreases, the hormonal environment becomes more favorable for fat burning. This is why people often feel lighter, less bloated, and more energetic after beginning a fasting routine. Their bodies are functioning more efficiently, which creates a smoother pathway for consistent fat loss. Another important aspect of fasting is its effect on hunger hormones. Many people believe fasting will make them hungrier, but the opposite is often true once the body adapts. Ghrelin, the hormone responsible for hunger, operates on a schedule. It rises at typical meal times and falls naturally shortly after. When someone begins fasting, these ghrelin waves adjust. After a few days, hunger decreases significantly because the body learns that food does not arrive at the old schedule. Meanwhile, the body supplies energy through stored fat, reducing the biological drive to eat. This adaptation makes fasting sustainable and often surprisingly comfortable. Fasting is also protective for metabolism. Traditional calorie-cutting diets send the body into a defensive mode where metabolism slows down to conserve energy. Fasting triggers the opposite response. Growth hormone increases to preserve muscle mass. Adrenaline levels rise to maintain energy, and the body becomes more metabolically flexible. In this heightened state, fat burning becomes faster and more efficient. Fasting teaches the body to switch between fuel sources smoothly rather than relying exclusively on food for energy. Metabolic flexibility is a sign of health, and fasting is one of the most effective ways to cultivate it. Different fasting methods provide different benefits. Short fasting windows like 16 hours help lower insulin daily and improve hunger control. Longer fasts such as 24 or 48 hours create deeper fat-burning states and amplify autophagy. Extended fasts of 72 hours or more are powerful metabolic resets, but must be approached with care, regardless of the fasting length. The key is consistency. Regular fasting periods train the body to rely on stored fat instead of demanding constant eating. Over time, fat loss becomes a natural outcome of this biological pattern rather than a forced effort. As the body becomes more experienced with fasting, people often notice that fat loss accelerates. The body becomes more comfortable accessing its fat stores, and energy remains stable throughout the day. This is a sign that the hormonal system has shifted into a fat-burning mode rather than a fat-storing one. Fasting gives the body the opportunity to use the energy it has stored. And once this process becomes routine, fat loss can happen rapidly and predictably. Sugars and refined carbs are the fastest way to halt progress because they trigger the most rapid and dramatic spikes in insulin, instantly shifting the body into fat storage mode. Even when some believe they are eating moderately or controlling calories, the presence of these foods can undermine all efforts by sending hormonal signals that override good intentions. The moment refined carbohydrates enter the bloodstream, they are broken down quickly into glucose, which the body must immediately manage. Insulin rises sharply to push that glucose into cells. This surge is not optional. It is a biological emergency response. And every time insulin surges, fat burning immediately stops. It doesn't matter if the meal was small. It doesn't matter if the rest of the day was perfect. A single spike can interrupt hours of fat burning because insulin takes time to fall. This is why people who eat frequent carb-heavy meals struggle with fat loss no matter how much discipline they apply. Sugars and refined carbs are especially harmful because they digest faster than whole foods. They have been stripped of fiber, structure, and natural nutrients that slow absorption. This allows glucose to rush into the bloodstream in large amounts, forcing insulin to rise higher and stay elevated longer. The result is a metabolic roller coaster that creates hunger, cravings, irritability, and fatigue. When glucose falls rapidly after the insulin surge, the person experiences a crash that tricks the brain into thinking more food is needed right away. This is why sugary snacks and refined breads rarely satisfy. They create artificial hunger that feels urgent. Most people interpret this as a lack of willpower, but it is simply the consequence of blood sugar instability. The body is reacting to the hormonal chaos caused by refined carbohydrates. Over time, repeated insulin spikes contribute to insulin resistance. When cells become overwhelmed by constant insulin exposure, they become less responsive. This forces the body to produce even more insulin to handle the same amount of glucose. Eventually, the person enters a state where fat loss becomes nearly impossible because insulin remains chronically high. Many people experience this without realizing it. They eat what they believe is a normal diet: morning toast, lunchtime sandwiches, evening rice or pasta, occasional sweets, and wonder why weight keeps creeping upward. The problem is not overeating. It is the constant presence of high insulin foods that keep the body locked in storage mode. Refined carbs also affect cravings in powerful ways. Because they digest so quickly, they do not provide steady energy. The rapid rise and fall of blood sugar drives a desire for more quick fuel. This creates a cycle where the person feels compelled to reach for more carbs every few hours. Over time, the brain becomes conditioned to expect frequent carbohydrate hits. This conditioning is deeply hormonal and neurological, not psychological weakness. When refined carbs are removed and replaced with whole foods that digest more slowly, cravings begin to fade naturally. The person experiences more stable hunger patterns and can go longer between meals without feeling desperate or shaky. Sugars and refined carbs also influence stress hormones. High sugar intake can increase cortisol levels, and elevated cortisol encourages fat storage, especially around the abdominal area. This is why people who eat sugary foods during stressful periods often gain weight rapidly. The combination of cortisol and insulin creates a perfect environment for fat accumulation. Reducing refined carbs lowers both blood sugar spikes and cortisol responses, making the entire hormonal landscape more supportive of fat loss. Another overlooked factor is how refined carbs impact gut health. These foods often promote inflammation and disrupt the balance of gut bacteria. Inflammation interferes with insulin signaling, appetite regulation, and metabolic efficiency. When inflammation rises, the body becomes more resistant to fat burning. Switching to whole fiber-rich foods improves gut health, reduces inflammation, and enhances metabolic function. This shift doesn't just support fat loss. It improves overall well-being, energy, mental clarity, and digestion. Refined carbs also affect satiety hormones like leptin. When someone consumes high-sugar foods regularly, leptin signaling becomes impaired. The brain no longer receives accurate messages about fullness, causing the person to overeat without realizing it. This imbalance makes portion control feel impossible because the hormonal signals that guide appetite are disrupted. Once refined carbs are removed, leptin sensitivity improves, and a natural feeling of satisfaction after meals returns. People are often shocked by how quickly this shifts once they eliminate the foods that were hijacking their appetite. Eliminating sugars and refined carbohydrates creates a metabolic environment where fat burning can occur consistently. Without constant insulin spikes, the body can access stored fat more easily. Hunger becomes more manageable. Energy becomes stable, and the person no longer feels controlled by cravings. Instead of forcing discipline, they begin to feel in control because their hormones support their goals rather than fighting against them. When refined carbs are removed and replaced with nutrient-dense foods, proteins, healthy fats, vegetables, and whole food carbohydrates like fruits, legumes, and intact grains, the body receives steady fuel without hormonal chaos. Insulin remains stable, blood sugar remains controlled, and fat burn becomes a natural state rather than a rare window. This stability is what makes long-term fat loss possible without constant struggle. Sugars and refined carbs are not just foods that slow progress. They are foods that biologically interfere with fat loss at every level. By removing them, a person gives their body the freedom to burn fat consistently and efficiently, unlocking a metabolic state that feels balanced rather than chaotic. Protein and whole foods stabilize hunger and reduce cravings because they work with the body's natural hormonal systems instead of against them. Unlike processed foods that trigger rapid spikes in insulin and blood sugar, whole foods digest slowly, provide steady energy, and send clear signals of fullness to the brain. Protein especially has a unique impact on hormones that regulate appetite. When you eat protein, it stimulates the release of peptide YY, GLP-1, and cholecystokinin, hormones that tell your brain you are full, satisfied, and don't need more food. These signals are powerful enough to override emotional cravings and habitual snacking patterns. Many people underestimate this effect and focus only on calories, but hormones determine how hungry you feel, how quickly hunger returns, and how intense cravings become. By increasing protein and relying on whole foods, you change the hormonal environment so that hunger becomes more predictable and easier to control. Whole foods provide bulk, fiber, and nutrients that slow digestion and keep you feeling full for hours. This stabilizes blood sugar levels, preventing the rapid crashes that trigger cravings for quick carbohydrates. When meals are built around whole foods like vegetables, fruits, legumes, nuts, lean meats, eggs, and fish, the digestive system processes them gradually, providing a steady release of glucose instead of flooding the bloodstream all at once. Without those sharp spikes and drops in blood sugar, the body maintains a calm metabolic rhythm. This stability is one of the most important factors in fat loss because it reduces the urge to eat between meals, making longer fasting periods or spaced out eating windows much easier to maintain. Protein also helps preserve lean muscle mass during fat loss. When the body receives adequate protein, it has the building blocks it needs to maintain muscle tissue, even during calorie deficits or fasting periods. Muscle plays a crucial role in metabolism, burning more calories at rest than fat tissue. Without enough protein, the body may break down muscle for energy, slowing metabolism and making fat loss harder. But when meals include high-quality protein sources, the body feels supported, protected, and able to burn fat without triggering metabolic slowdown. This contributes to long-term success rather than temporary changes. One of the most overlooked impacts of protein in whole foods is how they influence dopamine and reward pathways in the brain. Refined carbs and sugary foods create intense spikes of pleasure that reinforce cravings, creating a cycle of dependence. Whole foods do not create these artificial reward surges. Instead, they generate steady natural satisfaction. Over time, this retrains the brain to stop seeking hyperstimulating foods and to feel content with simple, nutrient-rich meals. People often report that cravings for junk food fade after a few weeks of consistently eating whole foods. This is not willpower improving. It is the brain returning to a balanced state. Protein also increases thermogenesis, the amount of energy your body burns just to digest and process nutrients. Compared to fats and carbohydrates, protein requires more work for the body to break down, meaning more calories are burned naturally through digestion alone. This contributes to fat loss without requiring additional exercise or movement. It is a subtle but powerful advantage that accumulates over time, especially when protein intake remains consistent throughout the day. Whole foods contain essential micronutrients that support hormonal balance, metabolic health, and fat-burning efficiency. Deficiencies in key vitamins and minerals can disrupt hunger hormones, slow metabolism, and increase cravings. For example, magnesium deficiency can intensify sugar cravings, while low potassium and inadequate fiber can cause appetite dysregulation. Whole foods naturally provide these nutrients in the correct proportions, allowing the body to function optimally without relying on supplements. When nutrient needs are met, the body stops sending false hunger signals that are actually attempts to correct deficiencies. Fiber-rich foods like vegetables, berries, seeds, and legumes expand in the stomach, creating a sense of fullness that lasts for hours. Fiber slows the absorption of glucose and reduces insulin spikes, making it easier for the body to enter fat-burning mode between meals. Fiber also improves gut health, feeding beneficial bacteria that produce short-chain fatty acids, which have been shown to regulate appetite, reduce inflammation, and improve insulin sensitivity. A healthy gut microbiome supports fat loss by lowering cravings, improving digestion, and stabilizing energy. The simple act of chewing whole foods also has metabolic benefits. Chewing triggers satiety signals earlier and more effectively than consuming soft, processed foods. This slows down eating speed, giving the brain time to register fullness before overeating occurs. In contrast, processed foods are often designed to be eaten quickly, bypassing natural satiety mechanisms and encouraging excessive intake. Protein and whole foods create predictable hunger patterns. Without processed foods disrupting hormones, people begin to recognize true hunger instead of craving-driven signals. They can comfortably go longer between meals, which naturally lowers insulin levels and promotes fat burning. This makes fasting or time-restricted eating more sustainable and less challenging. With balanced hunger, fat loss is no longer a fight against cravings, but a smooth metabolic process. Using protein and whole foods as the foundation of your meals creates a hormonal environment where the body wants to burn fat, not store it. Hunger becomes manageable, cravings fade, energy stabilizes, and the entire fat loss journey becomes more efficient and far less frustrating. Stress and poor sleep elevate hormones that block fat loss because the body's response to these factors is deeply rooted in survival mechanisms. Cortisol, often called a stress hormone, rises when the body perceives a threat, whether physical, emotional, or environmental. Elevated cortisol signals the body to store energy as fat, particularly around the abdominal area, because historically this was a protective mechanism designed to survive periods of danger or scarcity. Chronic stress keeps cortisol levels high, tricking the body into believing it must preserve energy. Even if a person is eating perfectly and exercising regularly, persistent stress prevents fat loss because the hormonal environment signals that storing fat is safer than releasing it. This explains why many people struggle to lose weight despite disciplined efforts. Because fat loss is not only about calories, but also about the hormonal messages that dictate energy storage. Poor sleep amplifies this effect. When the body does not get adequate restorative sleep, cortisol levels rise, ghrelin, the hunger hormone, increases, and leptin, the satiety hormone, drops. This combination makes people hungrier, crave more high-calorie foods, and feel less satisfied after meals. Sleep deprivation essentially hijacks the body's appetite regulation system, making it nearly impossible to resist overeating or to maintain consistent fat-burning patterns. The metabolic consequences are immediate. Insulin sensitivity decreases, glucose management worsens, and the body defaults to storing energy rather than burning it. This is why even a single week of inadequate sleep can undo progress in fat loss efforts. The body prioritizes survival over aesthetics, ensuring that energy is stored whenever possible. Stress and sleep also interact with each other in a feedback loop. High stress disrupts sleep quality, and poor sleep heightens a perception of stress. This loop creates persistent hormonal imbalance that interferes with metabolic function. Cortisol remains elevated for longer periods. Ghrelin continues to rise and leptin remains suppressed, reinforcing constant hunger and cravings. The body becomes trapped in a cycle of fat retention, energy fluctuation, and emotional strain. Addressing only diet or exercise in isolation does little to break this cycle. The hormonal signals driven by stress and sleep dominate the entire fat loss process, showing that lifestyle factors beyond food intake are critical determinants of success. The sympathetic nervous system, which is activated during stress, further contributes to fat storage. When the body perceives stress, it prepares for fight-or-flight situations, increasing adrenaline and cortisol levels. Initially, acute stress may burn some calories, but chronic activation of these pathways leads to sustained high cortisol, insulin resistance, and fat accumulation. This is particularly noticeable in visceral fat, the fat stored deep around organs because it is highly sensitive to hormonal shifts. Chronic stress therefore not only slows fat loss, but also changes body composition in ways that are metabolically dangerous. Reducing stress is essential not just for weight management, but for overall health and longevity. Sleep is equally critical for growth hormone production, which supports muscle preservation and fat burning. Growth hormone is released predominantly during deep sleep stages, and insufficient sleep significantly reduces its secretion. Lower growth hormone levels make it harder for the body to preserve lean muscle during fat loss, slowing metabolism and reducing energy expenditure. This creates a scenario where fat burning becomes inefficient, and even a disciplined diet cannot fully compensate. Quality sleep restores hormonal balance, allowing the body to maintain muscle, manage appetite, and burn fat effectively. The absence of adequate sleep is therefore a hidden barrier that many overlook when trying to lose weight. Cortisol and insulin also interact, creating another layer of complexity. Elevated cortisol can increase blood sugar and trigger higher insulin release, which locks fat into storage and prevents mobilization. This hormonal interaction is one reason why high-stress lifestyles often result in fat accumulation, even when total calorie intake is not excessive. It is not about overeating. It is about the body interpreting stress as a signal to preserve energy. In this state, the more someone tries to force fat loss through exercise or calorie restriction, the more their body resists. Fat loss becomes a battle against biology unless stress and sleep are addressed simultaneously. Practical strategies to manage these hormonal disruptors include structured sleep routines, stress reduction techniques like meditation or deep breathing, and lifestyle adjustments that reduce chronic tension. Even small improvements like consistent bedtimes, limiting exposure to screens before sleep, or engaging in low-stress physical activity can significantly lower cortisol levels over time. Reduced cortisol allows insulin and other metabolic hormones to operate more effectively, creating a hormonal environment conducive to fat burning. The body can finally shift from survival mode into a state that favors energy utilization rather than storage. Managing stress and improving sleep also enhance mental clarity and energy. When cortisol decreases and sleep quality improves, people experience steadier moods, better decision-making around food, and more sustainable exercise. Performance. These factors indirectly support fat loss because they reduce impulsive eating, improve adherence to healthy habits, and enhance overall metabolic function. Fat loss becomes more consistent because the body is no longer fighting against chronic hormonal imbalances. Consistency and progress is achieved when stress is minimized and sleep is optimized, showing that these two lifestyle factors are as important as diet and exercise in any fat loss strategy. Hydration supports metabolic function and appetite control because water is not just a passive component of the body. It actively participates in numerous biochemical processes that influence fat loss. When the body is dehydrated, metabolic efficiency declines, digestion slows, and the ability to mobilize fat for energy is impaired. Water is required for the breakdown of stored fat into usable energy, a process known as lipolysis. Without adequate hydration, this process becomes less efficient, and the body struggles to access its fat stores. Many people overlook hydration as a key factor in fat loss because they focus solely on diet and exercise. But even mild dehydration can create barriers to steady progress. Drinking enough water consistently primes the body to burn fat more effectively, supports cellular function, and stabilizes energy levels throughout the day. Hydration also plays a critical role in appetite regulation. Often the body's thirst signals are misinterpreted as hunger, leading to unnecessary food intake that disrupts calorie balance and elevates insulin levels. Drinking water before and between meals can help distinguish true hunger from thirst, reducing impulsive snacking and overeating. Research has shown that people who increase water intake before meals tend to consume fewer calories naturally because the stomach senses fullness from the liquid, which triggers satiety hormones, such as peptide YY and cholecystokinin. This effect helps regulate food intake without requiring conscious restraint, making fat loss feel easier and more sustainable. Proper hydration improves digestion and nutrient absorption, which indirectly supports fat-burning metabolism. Water is essential for producing digestive juices and for moving food smoothly through the gastrointestinal tract. When digestion is efficient, nutrients are delivered to cells in the right proportions, supporting energy production and reducing metabolic stress. Conversely, dehydration can lead to bloating, constipation, and sluggish digestion, all of which impair metabolic efficiency and can create hormonal signals that promote fat storage. Maintaining consistent water intake ensures that the digestive system works optimally, allowing the body to focus on energy utilization rather than coping with inefficiency. Hydration also affects blood volume and circulation, which are crucial for transporting hormones and nutrients throughout the body. Many hormones involved in fat metabolism, including insulin, cortisol, and leptin, rely on the bloodstream to reach their target cells. When the body is dehydrated, blood volume decreases, circulation slows, and hormone signaling becomes less effective. This can create imbalances that interfere with appetite regulation, fat mobilization, and energy levels. Staying hydrated ensures that hormonal signals are delivered efficiently, allowing the body to respond appropriately to metabolic cues and maintain a consistent fat-burning state. Water influences thermogenesis, the process by which the body generates heat and burns calories. Drinking cold water can slightly increase calorie expenditure as the body warms the water to body temperature. And general hydration supports the energy-intensive processes of digestion and cellular metabolism. While this effect alone is modest, it compounds over time, especially when combined with proper nutrition and activity. Hydration is therefore a subtle but important factor in the overall equation of fat loss, contributing to a metabolic environment where energy utilization is optimized. Electrolyte balance, which is supported by proper hydration, also impacts fat-burning metabolism. Sodium, potassium, magnesium, and calcium are minerals that work with water to regulate fluid balance, nerve function, and muscle contractions. Imbalances can lead to fatigue, poor exercise performance, and increased stress hormone levels, all of which hinder fat loss. Drinking water alone is important, but pairing it with electrolytes or beverages ensures that hydration effectively supports the body's metabolic machinery. Electrolyte balance also helps maintain consistent energy levels, reducing the risk of reaching for high-sugar foods that spike insulin and halt fat burning. Hydration further influences cognitive function and decision-making around food. Dehydration can impair focus, increase irritability, and reduce self-control, making it harder to resist cravings or adhere to structured eating windows. When people are well hydrated, they experience improved mental clarity, better mood regulation, and enhanced willpower, all of which contribute to more consistent adherence to healthy habits. Fat loss is not just a matter of physical activity. It also requires mental consistency, which hydration supports by keeping the brain functioning optimally. Water also plays a role in reducing inflammation and supporting recovery. Chronic inflammation can impair insulin signaling, disrupt appetite hormones, and slow metabolic rate. Adequate hydration supports the removal of metabolic waste, reduces oxidative stress, and helps the body recover from exercise, creating a more favorable hormonal environment for fat loss. When inflammation decreases, the body can access stored fat more easily. Hunger becomes regulated, and energy levels remain stable throughout the day. Strategic hydration throughout the day is most effective when water is consumed consistently rather than all at once. Drinking water in regular intervals supports continuous metabolic efficiency, maintains hormone signaling, and ensures that appetite regulation remains stable. Many people make the mistake of only hydrating when thirsty, but proactive hydration creates a foundation for all other fat loss strategies to work more effectively. It enhances the body's ability to mobilize fat, reduces unnecessary caloric intake, and supports energy levels necessary for sustained activity and metabolic health. Hydration also complements other lifestyle practices like meal timing, fasting, and protein intake. Water consumption enhances satiety during fasting periods, supports digestion of protein-rich meals, and maintains stable insulin and cortisol levels. This synergy creates a metabolic environment where fat burning is consistent, hunger is manageable, and energy remains high over time. This foundational support from hydration compounds, making fat loss more predictable and sustainable. Movement amplifies fat burning, but cannot overcome a disrupted metabolism, because exercise alone cannot counteract the hormonal environment that dictates whether the body stores or releases fat. Many people believe that increasing activity will automatically lead to weight loss. But without addressing underlying factors such as insulin resistance, chronic stress, poor sleep, and inflammation, movement becomes less effective. The body is designed to preserve energy when it senses imbalance or threat. Even the most intense workouts cannot force the body to release fat if hormones are signaling that energy should be stored. Understanding this principle shifts the focus from simply burning calories to creating the metabolic conditions where exercise can actually support fat loss rather than just being an added stressor. When the body's metabolism is functioning optimally, movement becomes highly effective for fat loss because it increases energy expenditure, improves insulin sensitivity, and triggers hormonal responses that encourage fat mobilization. Physical activity stimulates the release of growth hormone and catecholamines like adrenaline, which signal fat cells to release stored energy. Exercise also increases glucose uptake by muscle tissue, lowering circulating blood sugar and reducing insulin levels. These effects create a window where fat burning is accelerated, especially when combined with proper meal timing, hydration, and nutrient intake. In this context, movement amplifies the natural metabolic processes rather than working against them, demonstrating that exercise is most effective when the body is hormonally receptive. However, when metabolism is disrupted by factors such as chronic overeating, refined carbohydrates, stress, or sleep deprivation, exercise alone cannot overcome the body's resistance to fat loss. The hormonal signals that block fat burning remain active, and the energy expended during workouts is often compensated by increased hunger and higher caloric intake. This is why people who exercise vigorously but do not address underlying metabolic dysfunction often see minimal or temporary results. The body is protecting itself from perceived scarcity or threat, and movement cannot override this biological priority. In this scenario, exercise may improve cardiovascular health, build muscle, and support overall fitness, but it will not reliably produce fat loss unless metabolic issues are addressed. The type and timing of movement also play a critical role in fat burning efficiency. Resistance training and high-intensity interval training (HIIT) have been shown to stimulate post-exercise fat oxidation and improve insulin sensitivity more than steady-state cardio alone. Strength training preserves lean muscle mass, which is essential for maintaining a higher resting metabolic rate, while HIIT creates brief periods of elevated adrenaline that encourage fat mobilization. However, even these effective forms of exercise require that insulin levels are managed and that other lifestyle factors, such as nutrition, sleep, and stress, are supportive. Without hormonal alignment, the benefits of exercise are blunted and fat loss remains slow or stalled despite consistent effort. Movement also influences appetite hormones, which can be both beneficial and challenging depending on the individual's metabolic state. Exercise tends to increase peptide YY and GLP-1 hormones that promote satiety, but it can also temporarily increase ghrelin, the hunger hormone, in some people. When metabolic balance is disrupted, the rise in ghrelin can lead to overeating after workouts, negating the calorie deficit created by exercise. This reinforces the point that fat loss is not solely about energy expenditure, but about the hormonal environment that regulates energy use and storage. Successful fat loss occurs when movement is paired with strategies that stabilize insulin, manage stress, and optimize hunger signals. Daily movement, even outside structured exercise, contributes to metabolic efficiency. Walking, standing, stretching, and other low-intensity activities increase total daily energy expenditure and improve circulation, supporting nutrient delivery and hormone signaling. These non-exercise movements, often called neat non-exercise activity thermogenesis, are particularly important for individuals who are starting with metabolic resistance. Even small increases in daily activity, when combined with improved insulin control and nutrition, can accelerate fat-burning potential and enhance overall health outcomes. Movement also interacts with sleep and stress. Regular physical activity can reduce cortisol levels over time, improve sleep quality, and enhance insulin sensitivity, all of which support fat loss. Conversely, overtraining or exercising in a chronically stressed, sleep-deprived state can elevate cortisol further, impair recovery, and interfere with fat-burning processes. This highlights that the context in which exercise is performed matters as much as the exercise itself. When the body is given proper recovery, adequate nutrition, and metabolic support, movement becomes a powerful tool rather than a futile effort against biology. Ultimately, movement is a multiplier of fat loss, not the primary driver. It amplifies the effects of proper nutrition, hormonal balance, fasting periods, hydration, and stress management. Without these foundational supports, exercise cannot reliably produce the desired results. The body's hormonal environment dictates whether fat is released or stored, and movement works best when it operates within this supportive framework. When aligned correctly, movement accelerates fat burning, preserves lean muscle, improves metabolic flexibility, and enhances overall health, creating a positive feedback loop that supports long-term fat loss success. Consistency matters more than perfection because fat loss is a long-term process driven by repeated actions rather than isolated episodes of discipline. Many people believe that one perfect day, one flawless meal, or one extreme workout can compensate for weeks of inconsistent habits. But the body responds to patterns over time, not isolated events. Hormones, metabolism, and energy balance operate on continuous cycles, and occasional deviations have far less impact than the repeated daily behaviors that create a consistent environment for fat burning. When someone focuses on consistency, they give their body predictable signals that it can rely on, allowing insulin, cortisol, ghrelin, and leptin to regulate themselves more effectively. Perfection, on the other hand, is often unattainable and stressful, leading to cycles of guilt, binging, or abandonment of healthy routines, which disrupts progress rather than supporting it. Consistency creates momentum. Small, repeated actions compound over days, weeks, and months, producing results that feel disproportionate to the effort at any given moment. For example, consistently eating whole foods, prioritizing protein, spacing meals appropriately, staying hydrated, and engaging in regular movement all signal to the body that energy is being managed effectively. Over time, insulin sensitivity improves, hunger hormones stabilize, and the body naturally shifts into fat-burning mode. These effects are far more significant than the occasional perfect meal or a single workout session. This principle is what separates people who achieve sustainable fat loss from those who struggle with a constant all-or-nothing approach. Predictable, repeated behaviors give the body the hormonal consistency it needs to adapt efficiently. Focusing on perfection often leads to unnecessary stress, which itself interferes with fat loss. When someone tries to follow a rigid plan without flexibility, they are more likely to experience frustration, guilt, or shame when inevitable lapses occur. Stress elevates cortisol, which increases insulin resistance, promotes fat storage, and intensifies cravings for high-energy foods. In this way, the pursuit of perfection can paradoxically slow fat loss because it creates a hormonal environment that favors storage over burning. In contrast, focusing on consistency allows small deviations without derailing progress because the overall pattern remains supportive of metabolic health. The body responds to the average state of habits rather than isolated missteps, making steadiness far more important than flawless adherence. Consistency also supports habit formation, which reduces reliance on willpower. When behaviors are repeated regularly, the brain forms automatic pathways that make healthy choices easier over time. Eating protein at each meal, spacing meals for proper insulin management, drinking water consistently, and moving daily become habitual rather than conscious decisions. Once these habits are established, the body operates in an environment conducive to fat burning almost automatically. In contrast, chasing perfection relies heavily on constant mental effort, which is exhausting and unsustainable. Fat loss that is built on consistent habits becomes effortless relative to the struggle of trying to maintain perfection every day. Another benefit of consistency is its positive effect on metabolic adaptation, when the body experiences repeated signals of steady nutrition, controlled insulin, and balanced energy expenditure. It avoids the stress responses that slow metabolism, crash dieting, erratic eating patterns, or extreme workouts followed by rest days disrupt hormonal signals, causing the body to conserve energy and block fat loss. Consistency ensures that the body can adapt gradually and safely, preserving lean muscle, maintaining energy, and promoting steady fat utilization. The cumulative effect of repeated moderate interventions outweighs the temporary gains of extreme measures, making consistency the most reliable driver of long-term progress. Consistency also enhances resilience against setbacks. Everyone encounters social events, illness, travel, or unavoidable disruptions. When a foundation of consistent habits exists, occasional lapses do not derail overall progress because the body is operating in a generally supportive environment. Recovery from a single indulgence or skipped workout is faster and less impactful because the hormonal and metabolic patterns remain largely stable. In contrast, those who focus on perfection often view any deviation as failure, leading to cycles of guilt, overcompensation, or abandonment of the plan entirely. Consistency builds a buffer against these inevitable life events, allowing fat loss to continue steadily despite occasional challenges. Consistency in lifestyle habits extends beyond diet and exercise. Sleep patterns, stress management, hydration, and mental routines all contribute to the hormonal environment necessary for fat burning. Maintaining regular sleep schedules stabilizes leptin, ghrelin, and cortisol levels, enhancing appetite control and energy balance. Daily stress reduction practices, such as meditation or mindful movement, prevent chronic cortisol elevation that blocks fat utilization. Consistent hydration supports metabolic function, digestion, and nutrient transport. Each of these elements, when repeated reliably, compounds with nutrition and exercise to create a metabolic state that favors fat loss, demonstrating that consistency encompasses the full spectrum of lifestyle choices. Over time, consistency produces measurable results that feel achievable and sustainable, rather than relying on extreme measures or short-term perfection. Repeated, manageable actions create a cumulative effect that shifts the body's hormonal and metabolic environment. Fat loss becomes predictable because the body adapts to patterns. Hunger stabilizes, energy remains steady, and cravings diminish. This long-term approach minimizes frustration, improves adherence, and supports a lifestyle that can be maintained indefinitely. By prioritizing consistency over perfection, individuals leverage the natural biology of the body to achieve sustainable fat loss without excessive struggle or stress. Accountability transforms fat loss from a wish into a reality because the body and mind respond not only to internal habits, but also to external reinforcement. Many people underestimate the power of accountability, assuming that motivation and willpower alone are enough to achieve long-term results. However, motivation is fleeting and willpower can be exhausted by daily stressors, cravings, and decision fatigue. Accountability provides structure, support, and consistency, creating a system where behaviors are reinforced and tracked, which increases the likelihood of sustainable fat loss. It is not about pressure or shame. It is about creating an environment where healthy choices are easier, more predictable, and more likely to become habitual. When someone is accountable to themselves, a coach, a community, or even a simple tracking system, they are more likely to adhere to meal timing, proper nutrition, hydration, movement, and sleep patterns consistently. Accountability strengthens commitment by turning abstract goals into concrete actions. Saying, "I want to lose 1 pound a day," is a vague aspiration, but committing to specific actions like tracking meals, weighing oneself regularly, or reporting progress to someone else creates measurable milestones. Each completed action reinforces positive behavior and provides immediate feedback on progress. This feedback loop is critical because it informs the individual whether their strategies are effective or need adjustment. Without accountability, it is easy to ignore small mistakes, rationalize deviations, or overestimate adherence, which slows fat loss. The process of recording, reporting, or sharing creates transparency and encourages more intentional choices, which compounds over time into substantial results. Community accountability is particularly powerful because it engages social and psychological mechanisms that drive behavior. Humans are social creatures, and we are naturally influenced by the expectations, behaviors, and support of others. When someone joins a group, shares goals publicly, or participates in challenges with peers, they experience external reinforcement that motivates consistency. This does not require judgment or competition. It can be as simple as sharing progress updates or discussing challenges. Knowing that someone else is aware of one's actions increases the likelihood of following through on commitments. In essence, accountability taps into a natural survival and social mechanism, making adherence to fat loss strategies easier and more reliable. Accountability also mitigates the influence of short-term impulses on long-term goals. Fat loss requires repeated behaviors over time, and impulses such as emotional eating, late-night snacking, or skipping workouts can derail progress if left unchecked. When accountability structures are in place, these impulses are less likely to dominate decision-making. For example, logging meals or tracking fasting windows creates a moment of reflection before consuming food. Reporting progress to someone else or checking adherence against a plan introduces an additional layer of evaluation, which slows impulsive actions over time. These small interventions create a habit loop that reinforces disciplined choices, reduces hormonal disruptions, and stabilizes energy balance. Tools and systems enhance accountability by providing clarity and measurable data. Journals, apps, or digital trackers allow individuals to record meals, water intake, sleep, stress levels, and exercise. These tools make patterns visible, highlighting areas of strength and areas needing adjustment. Without this visibility, it is easy to underestimate or overestimate adherence, which creates a false sense of progress or discouragement. When data is available, decisions can be made objectively rather than emotionally. For example, someone might notice that skipping breakfast leads to overeating at night, or that poor sleep corresponds with slower fat loss. Accountability through tracking creates actionable insights that directly support fat-burning goals. Self-accountability is equally critical because external systems are not always available. Internal accountability develops when someone regularly evaluates their behaviors, measures progress, and adjusts habits based on outcomes. This requires honesty and consistency, as well as a commitment to long-term results rather than short-term comfort. Self-accountability strengthens discipline, builds mental resilience, and fosters a mindset oriented toward sustainable fat loss. People who cultivate this skill are able to maintain progress even during periods when external support is limited or when life events disrupt routines. Accountability also enhances motivation by creating visible progress. Fat loss can feel slow and discouraging because the changes are gradual and cumulative. Recording milestones, celebrating small victories, and reflecting on achievements reinforce continued effort. Each successful action provides positive reinforcement that fuels further commitment. Conversely, without accountability, progress can be invisible and setbacks may feel insurmountable, increasing the likelihood of abandoning strategies prematurely. Accountability transforms incremental successes into tangible evidence of capability, strengthening the resolve to continue. Finally, accountability integrates with all other pillars of fat loss. Meal timing, proper nutrition, hydration, movement, sleep, stress management, and consistency all benefit from a framework of accountability. When actions are monitored, reported, or reflected upon, they are more likely to be executed reliably, creating the hormonal and metabolic conditions necessary for sustained fat loss. Accountability turns intention into action, helps maintain alignment with goals, reinforces positive habits, and ultimately transforms fat loss strategies from theoretical concepts into consistent daily practices that produce measurable results. Mindset is a foundation of sustainable fat loss because the choices we make every day are driven as much by beliefs and perception as by biology. People often focus exclusively on diet, exercise, and hormones, but without the right mindset, even perfect strategies are difficult to maintain. Mindset shapes how we respond to hunger, cravings, setbacks, and challenges, influencing whether we persist with healthy habits or abandon them at the first sign of difficulty. A mindset oriented toward progress, learning, and long-term results creates resilience, patience, and self-compassion, which are essential for fat loss that is steady and sustainable. In contrast, a mindset focused on perfection, immediate results, or punishment creates stress, guilt, and frustration, which disrupt hormones, increase cortisol, and make fat loss far more difficult than it needs to be. Adopting a growth-oriented mindset allows people to view challenges and setbacks as opportunities rather than failures. Fat loss is rarely linear. Weight fluctuates daily due to water retention, hormonal shifts, and other natural variations. Without the right mindset, these fluctuations can be demoralizing, leading to impulsive decisions or abandonment of a plan. A growth mindset reframes these experiences as feedback, data about what works, what doesn't, and how adjustments can improve outcomes. Instead of feeling defeated by temporary stalls, individuals with this mindset analyze patterns, learn from their actions, and continue applying strategies consistently. Over time, this approach compounds into measurable results because the focus is on long-term adaptation rather than short-term perfection. Mindset also directly influences self-discipline and habit formation. The ability to consistently follow meal timing, fasting protocols, hydration routines, movement, and sleep schedules is rooted in one's mental approach. Viewing these behaviors as supportive routines rather than punishments creates intrinsic motivation that reduces resistance and reliance on willpower alone. People with constructive mindset are more likely to experiment, adjust, and maintain adherence even when challenges arise. They see effort as an investment in their health and energy rather than a restrictive chore, which aligns psychological states with biological processes to optimize fat loss. This alignment between mind and body makes disciplined behavior more sustainable and natural over time. The way we interpret hunger and cravings is heavily influenced by mindset. Many people perceive hunger as a signal of deprivation or weakness, which triggers anxiety and overeating. When mindset shifts to see hunger as a normal biological cue rather than a threat, it becomes easier to respond appropriately. Fasting, meal timing, and control portion sizes feel manageable rather than punishing. This perspective reduces stress, lowers cortisol, and prevents the hormonal spikes that block fat burning. Mindset transforms hunger from a psychological obstacle into a functional signal, allowing the body to access stored fat more efficiently and predictably. Mindset also affects the perception of food quality and choices. People with a flexible, learning-oriented mindset are more likely to focus on nutrient-dense foods that support metabolism, insulin control, and satiety rather than obsessing over perfection or fear bad foods. This reduces guilt-driven eating and emotional responses to occasional indulgences. A balanced mindset helps maintain consistency, which is far more important for fat loss than rigid adherence or sporadic extremes. By reducing mental friction around food choices, mindset supports the biological mechanisms necessary for sustainable fat burning. Visualization and goal setting are powerful aspects of mindset that enhance adherence and performance. Visualizing successful outcomes, imagining the physiological benefits of fat loss, or mentally rehearsing behaviors like meal timing, exercise, and hydration strengthens commitment and resilience. Goals framed as process-oriented rather than outcome-focused, such as focusing on daily adherence, movement, or protein intake, create actionable steps that reinforce momentum. Outcome-based thinking alone can create pressure, frustration, and impatience, which elevate stress hormones and interfere with fat-burning processes. A mindset centered on process ensures steady compounding progress. Self-compassion is another critical component. Fat loss is challenging, and everyone experiences lapses or imperfect days. A mindset that includes self-compassion prevents guilt and stress from sabotaging progress. Instead of responding to setbacks with harsh judgment, individuals with this approach analyze, adjust, and continue. This reduces cortisol spikes, prevents emotional eating, and allows habits to remain consistent over time. Fat loss is more reliable when the mind supports the body rather than working against it with fear, shame, or frustration. Mindset also interacts with all other pillars of fat loss. Meal timing, fasting, hydration, movement, stress management, sleep, and consistency are all more effective when executed with a resilient, growth-oriented, and self-compassionate mindset. Mental resilience ensures adherence, reduces stress, and aligns psychological behavior with biological signals. Over time, this synergy creates predictable fat loss, stable energy, reduced cravings, and improved health markers. Mindset becomes the invisible driver that amplifies the effects of every other strategy, making fat loss not just achievable, but sustainable.